She sat in front of the mirror in a studio in Paris, 1988. The scissors were ordinary, the decision wasn't. The calls stopped, options narrowed. Her face, once everywhere, began to vanish because the commercial world turned away. Brands said she looked too strong. Calvin Klein canceled a campaign. Maybelline never called back, all because of a haircut.
When I first cut my hair off and I went to Milano to do the shows, I was booked for like 20 shows. About 15 of them canceled me.
But what happened before that moment? What made her, at the peak of everything, reach for the scissors? Linda Evangelista grew up in St. Catharines, a quiet Canadian town where Italian values shaped the rhythm of home life, disciplined, protective, unwavering. Her parents were strict, and yet she loved fashion.
My dream was always, well, since the age of 12, to be a model. Like, my dream was to be on the cover of Vogue. My dream was to be shot in fashion. My dream was to do fashion shows and to be in magazines. Never in my mind did that include, I want to be famous.
At 12, she begged her mother to enroll her in a modeling course. It was expensive and promised more than it delivered. But for her, it was everything. So she learned how to hold herself, to be seen. Then came the first real opportunity. The course agency made a deal with a Japanese agency for a summer contract in Tokyo. She was 16 and had never traveled alone before. She boarded the plane with quiet resolve, not knowing what waited beyond customs. "They wanted me to pose nude," she said years later. "It was a nightmare. I panicked. I called the Canadian embassy. They helped me get out." She flew home and never wanted to model again. But the agency insisted she try something else. Not a job, but the pageant, Miss Teen Niagara. She wore a gown a friend had sewn for her. At first sight, it was disappointing because she didn't place. But what she didn't know, the real prize wasn't the crown. In the back row sat a scout from Elite Model Agency, watching in silence, already certain. He quietly handed her a card.
But there was a scout in the audience who gave me his card. But regardless of whether he was there or not, I would have found a way to get to New York and try to be a model.
Weeks later, she sent simple Polaroids. An invitation to New York followed, a chance to be seen again, this time on her own terms. She met John Casablancas, the powerful and controversial founder of Elite Models, a man known for discovering beauty as if it were currency. Like every new wannabe model, she did the rounds, 8 to 10 go-sees a day.
Linda may have taken the shortcut with her hair, but she definitely didn't with her modeling career.
I did local modeling first, and for like $8 an hour for the newspapers, bridal fashion shows, and I went to New York and I tested. I spent a fortune doing tests so that I could get a book together to go to Europe. And when I got to Europe, I started working every day.
Not much happened in New York, so did Paris. But Milan seemed a good choice. By 19, she had made it her base, as she liked the coldness and discipline. Her hair was long, rich brown, her face severe and still. Photographers began to build whole campaigns around that stillness. She gave editors a canvas, not a spectacle. Then came Maisel, a man who didn't need movement to understand what a face could hold. Designers in Milan began to call her the quiet one. She barely spoke backstage. She prepared like a dancer, breathing, pacing, eyes down. But once on the runway, she was absolute. The music seemed to shift. The light adjusted itself. It wasn't charisma, it was gravity. By the end of 1987, she had worked for Valentino, Yves Saint Laurent, Chanel, and Versace. Her face appeared in ads for Revlon, Clairol, and Azure, Vogue, Elle, Harper's, dozens of covers. It was 1988. On paper, she was everywhere, featured, photographed, forecasted to reign. Not just a model, but an emblem of the time. They called her untouchable. But something else was forming beneath the surface, something even the mirror hadn't caught yet. Booked, desired, near untouchable. It looked like the peak. But what no one knew, not her, not even him, was that this haircut wouldn't end it. It would multiply it. Not supermodel. Something beyond, a reference, a shift, a name you can't erase. And then, looking in a mirror somewhere far from home, she made the one choice that would change everything. Far from premeditated rebellion, the decision to cut her hair came as a whisper in a Paris studio in 1988, not from strategy, but from artistic intuition. Peter Lindbergh, who had collaborated with her before, suggested the cut. On set, Julian D. Wise swept her long brown curtain into a ponytail, paused, then snipped it off. Julian D. Wise later recalled being very nervous. I touched her arm and said, "This could be a disaster or be great." Julian D. Wise held the scissors, but the voice behind it was Peter Lindbergh. He had worked with her for years, knew the frame of her face better than anyone.
I said to Linda, "Why don't you cut your hair?" And she said, "You must be out of your mind." No? And then like a month later, she just walked in the studio and said, "I'm ready now." The hairdresser, he just took her whole hair back like this, no? And took it back and held it back and said, "Is everybody okay?" And she said, "Yeah, yeah." And she started crying, no? And he took this thing, whap! It was gone in one zip, no?
And he knew that this wasn't just about hair. It was about the perfect shot, a vision, and her identity. In a 2013 interview with the U.S. edition of Interview magazine, Linda Evangelista remembered the very moment that would change everything. She said, "They cut my hair off. Julian D. Wise had always wanted to cut my hair short, and Stephen was like, 'Do it, just do it.' I cried. I didn't leave my apartment for a couple of days." The cut was sharp, boyish, defiant. Gone was the flowing brown curtain that softened her jaw. What remained was a silhouette, blunt, androgynous, unapologetic. Within days, the shift became rupture. Calvin Klein withdrew. L'Oreal hesitated. Maybelline disappeared. The phones went quiet. The industry didn't see reinvention. It saw rejection. Her hair had been part of the agreement, the myth, the sale. Now she looked different, stronger, stranger, unsellable. Agencies panicked, editors wavered, bookers disappeared. She would recall later in an interview, "They canceled bookings, canceled options. I lost a lot of money. But then Stephen started shooting me with the haircut and things turned. That autumn, he shot her for Vogue Italia. From that moment on, she became untouchable.
And then the next season, that's all they wanted were girls with short hair.
She changed her hair more than any other model of her time. Blonde, raven, red. She wore each shade like a whispered reply to questions fashion was too timid to voice. Sometimes bobbed, sometimes shaved, always deliberate. Her hair became a language, nuanced, unpredictable, endlessly reinterpretable. Linda's career was not just soaring, it was seismic. She walked for every house that mattered. Her face appeared everywhere. Donna Karan, Prada, Dolce & Gabbana. She became muse and measurement. Lagerfeld, Alaïa, Versace, Chanel. She moved through them like certainty. She didn't just fit the brand, she fractured it and rebuilt it in her image.
Linda could be the absolute height of sophistication, but she could look like an Italian earth mother. She was tireless. She would do anything.
Carl would sometimes torture me. One show I did 12 changes because he kept testing me to see how many I could do in a show, and I made all my changes. I made them on time.
She had appeared on more than 700 magazine covers worldwide, including nearly 100 for Vogue Italia alone. In 1990, she gave the decade its most iconic sentence: "We don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day." Together with Christy, Naomi, and later Cindy, she formed a new pantheon, not 3, but 4. They were an axis. And then came the video. In 1990, Freedom changed everything. Directed by David Fincher, soundtracked by George Michael, and fronted by the 4 of them, it didn't just define the supermodel era, it crowned it. When we entered the room, Naomi would say years later, people didn't speak, they stared. By 1996, she was no longer just a model. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award, handed to her by Anna Wintour herself. A few years later, a star engraved with her name appeared on Canada's Walk of Fame. She had become more than presence. By the 2000s, fashion journalists were no longer debating who ruled the runway. The partnership with Meisel became legend. He didn't direct her. He translated through her. She wasn't his subject. She was his syntax. Editors called her editorial oxygen. She was the one who could vanish and reappear as someone else. Every shoot a new incarnation.
I look back and think, wow, I would have done things a lot differently and said things a lot differently. I don't know what was happening. It was happening so fast.
I'm difficult, okay?
I know you are.
If I would have known then what I know today, I think I would have slowed it down a bit. I didn't appreciate so much what was going on. I didn't have the time to.
Linda doesn't pose, Meisel once said. She transforms.
I mean, in '93 was the year they said it was over, that
Right.
it was over for us. And I was on September 1993 American Vogue cover.
So she fit in, transformed and stayed even when others left the runway.
When Linda and I work together, it's like we create things together. So that's what makes it, she's creative and she puts all of herself into it.
I'll do anything for him. I mean, he had me kissing a chimpanzee. It's just a character that you take in pictures like actors do in films, but you do it for stills. I leave that character behind in the studio.
She was always private, but her relationships were real and sometimes painful. She was once engaged to Gerald Marie, the former head of Elite Paris, later accused by multiple women of sexual assault. Then came actor Kyle MacLachlan, her husband from 1998 to 2000. And years later, a lost pregnancy with a French national never made public at the time. But even at her most vulnerable, she never sought the spotlight. She left the drama behind closed doors and walked on. On October 11, 2006, Linda Evangelista gave birth to her son, Augustine James. "Motherhood is my whole life now," she told Harper's Bazaar years later. She didn't step back to disappear. She stepped back to be present. New York became smaller, slower, supermarket aisles instead of backstage corridors, mornings instead of red carpets. But in 2011, her name returned to the headlines. Linda filed court papers naming François-Henri Pinault, the CEO of Kering, as the father of her child, the group behind Gucci, Balenciaga, Saint Laurent. At the time, Pinault was already in a relationship with actress Salma Hayek, whom he married in 2009. The world blinked. It wasn't scandal exactly, but it was news. He later acknowledged paternity. She never made a big comeback, she simply returned. She appeared in a handful of campaigns, gave a few interviews, and continued working when she chose to. It began quietly. A consultation, a promise, cool sculpting, non-invasive, safe, refined, so they said.
It was going to contour areas of the body that as I age, I have some fat deposits, and I understood cool sculpting would take care of that. And it was supposed to be non-invasive, not painful, no surgery.
And for someone who had once defined beauty, to feel disfigured was a devastation few could imagine. A rare side effect, paradoxical adipose hyperplasia. The fat hadn't vanished. It had thickened, hardened, and uneven. Her words were simple, devastating. "I loved being on a runway. Now I dread running into someone I know. I can't live like this anymore." The woman who had once reshaped the very idea of a model now hid from reflections, just in shame. For 6 years, she disappeared behind curtains and soft light. But even that silence was interrupted. In 2018, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and when it returned in 2022, the quiet deepened.
I guess after you've been very ill, you just value life even more. Am I right?
True.
Yeah.
I've had so many surgeries, and I thought I could tackle anything, but nothing like chemo to put you in your...
That same year, September 2022, Stephen Meisel stepped behind the camera once more. The man who had once framed her myth now captured her pain. For British Vogue, he photographed her again. Scarves covered her neck. High collars hid what time had altered. The light was gentle, the angles forgiving. And in those photographs, something returned. A presence, a grace. Not untouchable, but unmistakably Linda. But the interviews told a different story.
Do you see the angle of my arms?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can't put them next to my body because this bulge is making them veer off in an angle. Versace won't want to dress me with that sticking out of my body. My son used to say, before I told him the truth, he used to make comments frequently like, "Mommy, do you remember when you used to be fun? Mommy, remember when you used to laugh all the time? How come you don't laugh anymore?" So I hate what this has done to my relationship with him.
I miss modeling, she said, but I don't miss being looked at. That's the part that hurts now. And in that stillness, the same stillness she once held in silence on runways, she became something else entirely. A monument.
The typical signs of aging, I never had an issue with. And I especially don't have an issue now because my goal is to get old. I want to be old. I've always thought wrinkles were beautiful.
Some faces follow the fashion. Others drift from the frame, replaced by fresher features, louder colors, newer names. But a few remain, etched not in trend, but in tone, like a note that lingers long after the song has ended. But some leave behind an outline too sharp to erase, like Linda Evangelista.